Bonjour.
Good morning. The 9,896th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Israel, Libya, Syria, and Turkey to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Mr. Khaled Khiari, Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific, Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and Peace Operations, and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Undersecretary General for Peace Operations. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Mr. Khaled Khiari.
Monsieur le Président, distingués membres du Conseil de sécurité,
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council,
former Assad government on 8th of December 2024, this Security Council has been regularly briefed on Israeli violation of 1974 disengagement of forces agreement between Israel and Syria, as you will hear from Undersecretary General for Peace Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix. The Secretary General has been clear on his condemnation of all actions that are inconsistent with the agreement. There have been hundreds of reported Israeli airstrikes across Syria since 8th of December of last year. In the southwest, the Syrian coast, northeastern Syria, Damascus, Hama, and Homs. The IDF has publicly confirmed it has built multiple positions in the area of separation on the Golan. Israeli officials have also spoken about Israel's intentions to stay in Syria for the foreseeable future. Such facts on the ground are not easily reversed. They do threaten Syria's fragile political transition. Most recently, as conveyed to this council by the Syrian Permanent Mission on 7th of April, at dawn on 3 April, there were reports that Israel carried out multiple airstrikes across Syria, including in Damascus, the Hama military airport, and the T4 military airport in Homs. Israeli simultaneous attacks in Daraa reportedly resulted in 9 civilian casualties. The Syrian interim authorities condemned these attacks, qualifying them as blatant violation of international law and Syrian sovereignty, and an attempt to destabilize Syria. Let me also recall earlier indications by the Damascus authorities, as had been published in numerous media outlets, of not presenting threats to its neighbors and seeking peace on their borders. The Israeli Defense Minister was quoted on 3rd of April as qualifying the recent airstrikes in Syria as a warning for the future, and as he added that Israel would not allow Syria to become a threat to Israel's security interests. Considering these developments, let me recall this Council's presidential statement on 14th of March, which reaffirmed a strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria, and called on all states to respect these principles and to refrain from any action or interference that may further destabilize Syria. This Council's commitment to Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity grows in importance by the day. Syria's opportunities to stabilize after 14 years of conflict must be supported and protected for Syrians and for Israelis. This is the only way regional peace and security can be realized. Mr. President, let me conclude by recalling the statement made by Special Envoy Pedersen on 3rd of April about Israeli military escalation, that such actions undermine efforts to build a new Syria at peace with itself and the region and destabilize Syria at a sensitive time. Syria is at a crossroads and deserves a chance to continue to work towards an inclusive political transition. where the Syrian people can overcome the conflicts, revive their economy, realize their legitimate aspirations, and contribute to regional stability. Furthermore, short-term and tactical security actions and gains should not derail prospects for peace agreement between the two neighbors and long-term stability at their internationally recognized border. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I thank the ASG for his comments, and I now give the floor to Mr. Lacroix, the USG for Peace Operations. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Security Council for giving me this opportunity to report to you on the situation in the UNDOF area of operations, UNDOF, the UN Disengagement Observer Force, in implementing its mandate.
The Security Council consultation on UNDOF on the 19th of March has remained volatile and continues to be characterized by significant violations of the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement with the entry of the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, into the area of separation since the 8th of December. The Israeli Defense Forces currently occupies 12 positions that they established on the Bravo side, 10 in the areas of separation and 2 in the area of limitation in the vicinity of the Bravo line. They also continue to construct counter-mobility obstacles along the ceasefire line and have flown on several occasions aircraft across the ceasefire line and helicopters into the area of separation. The IDF also continue to impose some restrictions of movement on UNDOF and Observer Group Golan personnel in the area of separation. Their restrictions on the movement of people residing in the area also continue. Residents in some areas have protested disruptions from IDS activities, including farming, detention of civilians, and seizure of large numbers of livestock, and we have conveyed these concerns to our Israeli interlocutors. Some residents have also appealed to UNDOF to ask the IDF to leave their villages. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, in this difficult operational environment, UNDOF personnel supported by the Observer Group Golan have continued to carry out to the best of their abilities activities entrusted to it, namely observation of the area of separation and the ceasefire line from their positions, as well as patrols and reports on the evolving situation.
Permettez-moi de faire le point sur
Allow me to update you on the evolving security situation in UNDOF's area of operation. In recent weeks, UNDOF personnel have noted multiple explosions on the Bravo side, which they deem to be significant kinetic activity linked to the efforts of the IDF to, and I quote, demilitarize the south of Syria.
On the 27th of March, following an IDF attack on a location in the area of limitation, the IDF stated, and I quote, that during a planned IDF activity, a number of armed individuals opened fire from Kohaya on IDF forces. The IDF sent an aerial instrument to scan the field. The aerial instrument was attacked. Most recently, early morning on the 3rd of April, UNDOF personnel in the area of separation observed IDF troops in vehicles moving in a southeasterly direction on the Bravo side. The UNDOF personnel later heard and observed multiple explosions in the southern part of the area of limitation on the Bravo side. UNDOF assessed these explosions to be a result of the impact of IDF artillery fire, likely in Nawa and Tassil. On the 3rd of April, the IDF informed UNDOF that, and I quote, in the past few hours, the IDF has struck remaining military capabilities in the areas of the Syrian military bases, Hama and T4, along with additional military infrastructure in the Damascus area. The IDF will continue to act to eliminate any threat to the citizens of the State of Israel, end of quote. Additionally, open sources reported on the 3rd of April incidents of residents in Dera, including Tassil and Nawa, clashing with the IDF convoy that attempted to enter the towns, forcing the convoy to retreat under IDF air cover. UNDOF continues to liaise with both parties and engages on specific issues impacting UNDOF operations and on complaints conveyed to UNDOF by a resident in the area of separation. In their engagement with the UNDOF leadership, senior IDF officials have restated that their presence in the area of separation was necessary to secure it from what they described as terrorist elements, and informed that Israel had no territorial ambitions in Syria. They have reiterated Israel's expectation of the demilitarization of the area southwest of Damascus. On the Bravo side, UNDOF is reinforcing its coordination mechanism through a new liaison arrangement with Syrian authorities. This includes enhancing information sharing protocols and regular consultative meetings. It remains critical that all parties uphold their obligation under the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement, including by ending all unauthorized presence in the areas of separation and limitation, as well as refraining from any action that would undermine the ceasefire and stability on the Syrian Golan. There should be no military forces or activities in the area of separation other than those on UNDOF. All actions that are inconsistent with the agreement are unacceptable. UNDOF must have freedom of movement in its area of operations. The freedom of movement and safety and security of UNDOF and Observer Group Golan personnel conducting their mandated task is of the highest priority. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, in conclusion, I count on the continued cooperation of both parties so that the force can fully carry out its mandate. UNDOF remains essential for stability in the Golan and in the region. We are grateful to the Security Council for the continued support provided to UNDOF, and I reiterate that this unanimous support is needed now more than ever in this difficult time. Thank you. I thank the USG for his comments, and I give the floor to council members wishing to speak. I give the floor to the permanent representative of Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the members of the A3+, namely Guyana, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and my own country, Algeria. At the outset, we would like to thank USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix and ASG Khaled Khiari for their valuable briefings. Mr. President, the A3+ is concerned about the military escalations by Israel in Syria, which are taking place at a critical period of Syria's history and exacerbate the already fragile situation in this country. We understand that the recent airstrikes have reportedly resulted in 9 civilians' casualties and damage the civilian infrastructure. The A3+ strongly condemn these military operations that violate international law, including the United Nations Charter, in particular Article 2.4, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. In this regard, we stress the importance of ensuring full respect for Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also echo the special envoy's concern that such actions undermines efforts to build a new Syria that is at peace with itself, at peace with the region. It is crucial to highlight that Syria has neither threatened nor attacked Israel. Furthermore, we must recognize that the ongoing violence exacerbates the humanitarian crisis, which has already displaced millions and left countless others in desperate need of assistance. it is vital to reiterate that both civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected in accordance with international humanitarian law. The A3 Plus is further concerned about the impact that the destruction of Syria's military capabilities would have on the country's stability and its ability to ensure security, to combat terrorism effectively. The A3 Plus reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the unity, to the sovereignty, to the independence, and to the territorial integrity of Syria. These principles must be respected by all, under all circumstances. Upholding international law is not a matter of choice, but an obligation. And this escalatory action of Israel, compounded by inflammatory statement by Israeli officials about the, and I quote, indefinite presence of their forces in Syrian territory are contributing to instability and threatening regional peace and security. The A3 Plus therefore calls for, first, the immediate cessation of attacks against Syria's infrastructures. Such actions destabilize the country and may incite further unrest and conflict among neighboring countries. Second, full respect for the 1974 disengagement agreement, including provisions related to the zone of separation. In this regard, we underscore that there should be no military forces, no military equipment or personnel in the area of separation other than those of handoff. Third, an end to the Israeli incursion and the complete withdrawal of its forces from Syria's territory. We emphasize that the Golan Heights is an occupied Syrian territory, as reaffirmed by Security Council Resolution 497. This Security Council must uphold its resolutions and ensure complete compliance by all parties. Mr. President, the A3 Plus stands ready to work with all member states to ensure a peaceful resolution to the ongoing crisis in Syria, prioritizing the needs and aspirations of the Syrian people. The prosperity of Syria is critical to the stability of the entire region. Any action by external actors that jeopardizes Syria's security must be condemned by the international community. Rebuilding Syria requires an investment in dialogue, not sanction. enhanced collaboration, not aggression, and steadfast support, not desertion. The international community must echo the calls of the Syrian people by mobilizing necessary resources, lifting unilateral sanctions, and providing required support to Syria. I thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the permanent representative of Algeria for his statement on behalf of the A3+, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
President, I thank USG Lacroix and ASG Chiari for their briefings. In December last year, under the pretext of a quote-unquote limited and temporary operation, Israel deployed troops in the Israeli-Syrian area of separation and has maintained the deployment to this day. During this period, the Israeli military has frequently conducted airstrikes against Syria, promoting the so-called demilitarization in southern Syria. Last week, Israel launched airstrikes on multiple targets within Syria, causing significant casualties and damage to facilities. Israel's actions severely violate international law and infringe upon the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria. We condemn these actions and urge Israel to withdraw, to immediately put an end to these attacks and to withdraw from Syria territory as soon as possible. The 1974 disengagement agreement should be upheld, and the fulfillment of UNDOF's mandate should be ensured. At present, the situation in Syria remains at an important and sensitive stage. A smooth political transition is the key to restoring peace and stability in Syria and should be the primary goal of the joint efforts of all parties. We hope that the Syrian interim authorities will follow the principles set out in Council Resolution 2254 and engage in broad dialogue and consultation with all sectors in Syria to promote an inclusive political process. In this regard, we call on all parties to actively support and cooperate with the work of Special Envoy Pedersen. We urge the Syrian interim authorities to advance investigations into the coastal violence incident in a transparent and responsible manner with the timely release of the results and under the oversight of the international community. I also want to reiterate that the Syrian interim authorities should fulfill its counter-terrorism obligations and take decisive measures to combat all council-listed terrorist organizations, including the ETIM, also known as the Turkestan Islamic Party. President, since the outbreak of the current round of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Middle East has been mired in deep turmoil. Recently, Israel, ignoring strong opposition from the international community, has resumed military operations in Gaza, posing further challenges to regional security and stability, which is deeply concerning. We urge all parties concerned to exercise calm and restraint, abandon the obsession with the use of force, refrain from actions that could exacerbate tensions in the region, return to the right track of a political settlement, and resolve their differences through dialogue and negotiation. The international community, especially influential countries, should step up diplomatic efforts and play an active and responsible role in the political settlement of the conflict. China is ready to work with the international community to continue to make unremitting efforts to promote long-lasting peace and stability in Syria and to restore peace and tranquility in the Middle East. Thank you, President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of China, and I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank you for convening this urgent meeting requested by Algeria and Somalia in response to the latest wave of Israeli aggression against the Syrian Arab Republic. We also thank Under-Secretary General Jean-Pierre Lacroix and Assistant Secretary General Khalid Khiari for their briefings. Pakistan is deeply alarmed by Israel's ongoing and escalating attacks on sovereign Syrian territory. These strikes represent a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, international law, relevant Security Council resolutions, and the 1974 Disengagement Agreement. The recent airstrikes targeting multiple locations in Syria, including civilian infrastructure and urban centers, have caused civilian casualties and pose a grave threat to regional and international peace and security. Such actions further undermine Syria's pursuit of political stabilization and national reconciliation, objectives that are supported by this Council and the wider international community. We echo Special Envoy Pedersen's strong condemnation of these military escalations. As he rightly stated, they undermine efforts to build a new Syria at peace with itself and the region. His warning must be taken seriously. Mr. President, we are witnessing a deeply troubling pattern: continued unprovoked Israeli military aggression, repeated violations of the disengagement agreement, and illegal military presence in the area of separation, and open declarations of indefinite occupation. This blatant disregard for Syria's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity must be unequivocally condemned. The Secretary General's latest report also highlighted how Israeli restrictions have severely hampered UNDOF's ability to fulfill its mandate, including planned patrols and freedom of movement. The 1974 disengagement agreement remains binding. No force other than UNDOF should be present between the Alpha and Bravo lines. Any unilateral violation of this agreement is unacceptable. Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be fully respected. Israel's occupation of the Syrian Golan remains illegal and, as per Security Council Resolution 497, is null and void. The Council must demand Israel's complete withdrawal from the occupied Golan Heights. The Security Council cannot allow illegal military actions to set dangerous precedents. The presidential statement of 14th March reaffirmed Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity and urged all members to uphold these principles. Israel's actions are in direct violation of this consensus. The Council must act decisively and ensure accountability. Mr. President, Pakistan remains attached to the principle of Syrian-led, Syrian-owned political process grounded in the principles contained in Resolution 2254. Sustainable peace in Syria depends on the inclusive political transition, national unity, and reconciliation. Recent progress, including the formation of a transitional government, adoption of an interim constitution, and integration of civil and military institutions, must not be derailed by external military interference. The humanitarian consequences of these attacks are devastating. With over 16 million people already in need, the deliberate targeting of civilian areas and infrastructure only deepens the crisis and violates the core principles of international humanitarian law. We are equally concerned about the broader regional implications. Continued escalation risks igniting wider conflict at a time when diplomacy, de-escalation, and reconstruction must be the priority. The Council must send a clear and united message. Violations of sovereignty cannot be normalized, and the principles of the UN Charter must be upheld. We've listened carefully to USG Lacroix and Assistant Secretary General Carey. These are serious findings on which the Security Council should pronounce, since the Council's calls are not being heeded to. We are ready to work with Council members and the pen holders in this regard. In conclusion, Pakistan stands in full solidarity with the brotherly people of Syria. We reaffirm our unwavering commitment to Syria's sovereignty, political independence, and the right of its people to live in peace, security, and dignity, free from occupation and external aggression. I thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the Permanent Representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Assistant Secretary General Khiari and Undersecretary General Lacroix for your briefings. As council members, we should all agree that a stable and sovereign Syria is critical for our collective security. President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier this week, and they had a constructive discussion on the importance of regional peace, security, and stability. The United States shares Israel's concerns about Syria becoming a base for terrorism, and both our countries have been clear that we oppose malign actors using Syria as a platform to foment instability. We know that ISIS and Al-Qaeda continue to plot and conduct attacks within Syria. And we know Hezbollah and other Iran-backed terrorists are trying to regain a foothold in Syria to threaten Israel and other regional states. And we know that terrorists, both Syrian and foreign, were complicit in last month's atrocities in Western Syria. In this context, Israel has an inherent right of self-defense, including against terrorist groups operating close to its border. We welcome the Syrian permanent representative's March 3 letter to the Council, stating that Syria will not be a haven for terrorism, nor will it be a part of any axes or polarization or become involved in any conflicts or wars that threaten the security and stability of the region. This is a positive message of intent by the interim authorities. As we have said since December 8th, we will judge the Syrian interim authorities not by their words, though, but by their actions. The United States continues to support efforts that will bring lasting stability between Israel and Syria, and we hope to see a restoration of calm so Syrians can live in peace with their neighbors. Broad and enduring stability in Syria will also depend on advancing justice and accountability. We know this is true not only for American families whose loved ones have gone missing in Syria, but indeed for all whose loved ones have been missing. We continue to call on the interim authorities to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, protect minorities, and advance accountability for brutal crimes, including the recent atrocities in Western Syria. We have welcomed recent statements by both Israel and Turkey that they do not seek conflict with one another in Syria. The Council should recommit itself to combating terrorism in Syria, call on Iran and other external actors to stop arming and advising terrorist groups, and urge regional states to rein in the actions of proxies who threaten regional peace and security. Thank you.
Je remercie, Madame.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to thank USG Lacroix and USG Chiari for their briefings. Mr. President, 4 months ago, Syrians opened a new chapter, bringing hope for a more stable and secure future. It is clear that many serious challenges lie ahead and will need to be addressed on the path of building a new Syria. Let me make 2 points in this regard. First, a peaceful and secure Syria is in interests of all Syrians, its immediate neighbors, and the wider region. It is equally in the interest of the entire international community. The best way to achieve it is through diplomacy and dialogue. Once again, we urge all parties to refrain from violence and to exercise maximum restraint at this critical juncture. We call on all the states with influence to use it to that end and to promote dialogue and confidence building. Mr. President, we have been saying this for years and we remain resolute. It is vital that Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, and unity are fully respected. Syrian people need peace and our firm support. So we reiterate our unwavering call for the full respect of international law, including international humanitarian and human rights law. We acknowledge the interest of countries in the immediate neighborhood to ensure that events in Syria do not pose risk to their security. However, we remain convinced that external military interventions in the fragile moment of Syrian transition do not contribute to this legitimate objective. Indeed, they could have a counter effect. In this vein, we condemn the repeated and intensifying Israel's military escalations in Syria, which risk undermining an already fragile security situation in Syria and beyond. We call on Israel to immediately cease the bombings and to withdraw from the zone of separation defined by the 1974 disengagement agreement. UNDOF must be fully able to carry out its mandate, including freedom of movement. Ceasefire must be preserved and the agreement implemented. Besides being illegal, prolonged Israeli incursions risk undermining the transition process in Syria, aggravate tensions, and risk destabilizing the region. Second, an inclusive political transition is in the interests of both the Syrian leadership and Syrian people. We take note of recent developments toward political transition, including the unveiling of a new and expanded cabinet. In this regard, we encourage the interim authorities to continue working toward a credible, inclusive, and sustainable transition, one grounded in good governance and transparency. This includes the formation of a provisional legislative council and a committee to draft the new constitution, as well as preparations for free and fair elections. This should be in line with relevant international standards and the key principles of the Security Council Resolution 2254. In conclusion, Mr. President, let me reiterate, in a highly unstable regional environment, Syria has a historic opportunity to become a center of peace and security. That requires proactive engagement by all stakeholders. In Syria, it requires the interim authorities to make the right decisions based on an inclusive national dialogue for the benefit of all Syrian people and in full respect of their human rights and freedoms. It also requires increased and continuous regional and international support. And again, it requires respect for the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Syria. Slovenia remains ready to work with others, both in this Council and elsewhere, to assist Syrians in realizing a new Syria, free, inclusive, and secure in a secure and stable region. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for her statement. I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Panama. Thank you, Mr. President. Panama welcomes the holding of this emergency meeting at the request of Algeria and Somalia on the situation in Syria, and we welcome the reports provided by the ASG for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific, Mohammed Khaled Khiari, and by USG for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix. Their explanations have given us an update on recent incidents which are disturbing. Our country reiterates its strong commitment to the principles of the UN Charter, in particular, respect for sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of the entire territorial extension of the Syrian Arab Republic, as well as its inalienable right to determine its future without any form of foreign interference and in accordance with international law. On the 1st of March, the formation of a new government in Syria was announced. We believe that this new phase is an opportunity to work towards an inclusive political process, guaranteeing the participation of all citizens without distinction with regard to their ethnic origin, belief system, or gender, and which will contribute effectively to stability and security for Syria and the region. Syria needs the assistance and the firm commitment of the international community. After 14 years of a cruel civil war, Syrians need help rebuilding effective governance, which does not allow for infiltration by extremist influences in their politics, and help fighting the development of terrorist group activities in their territory. Panama endorses the appeal made by the UN Special Envoy, who underscored the urgent need to prevent any new cycle of violence in Syria and to focus efforts on promoting trust, inclusion, and economic recovery. Similarly, Panama expresses its profound concern at recent attacks, air attacks, which have taken place in different regions of Syria. They have affected strategic infrastructure, including scientific research facilities, airports, and other areas of military and civilian importance. Events reported by different sources cause concern for a number of reasons, particularly when they result in mass casualties, significant material damage, and when they have generated a climate of greater uncertainty and greater instability at a particularly delicate time for the country. We particularly regret the impact that this situation is having on the civilian population, and we underscore the importance of guaranteeing at all times protection for civilians and strict respect for international humanitarian law. Panama takes note of the recent reports by the UN Disengagement Observer Force, which carried out an inspection mission in a number of areas in the south of Syria, including areas in the province of Daraa, impacted by last week's attacks. Access granted to UNDOF and UNDOF's observations have reported on the seriousness of damage in key areas, both military and civilian. Panama reaffirms its support, Mr. President, for the verification and monitoring activities carried out by the UN forces. They are essential to preserve stability, guarantee compliance with international agreements, and to protect the most vulnerable communities. Thank you. I thank the permanent representative of Panama for his statement, and I now give the floor to the permanent representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are grateful to Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific, Khalid Hiari, as well as the Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, for their detailed reports about the situation in Syria. We view today's emergency meeting, which was requested by our Algerian and Somalian colleagues, with the support of the Arab group, as very timely. In the 4 months since the change of power in Damascus, Israel has already carried out more than 700 strikes targeting Syria. Recently, the geographical span of these strikes has expanded. The Hama air base, as well as military bases in Palmyra, have also been targeted. The Israelis maintain control of the buffer zone, which has been occupied since after 8 December 2024, and they also occupy vast swathes of the south of Syrian territory. We have been alarmed by statements made by senior Israeli officials about the need to demilitarize the south of Syria and about the IDF's plans to remain in the country indefinitely. These actions are a gross violation of Syrian sovereignty and territorial integrity, which under no circumstances need to be called into question, regardless of who holds power in Damascus. In this context, worth noting is the statement delivered by Ahmed Shara. On the 16th of January, he confirmed his country's commitment to the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement and the willingness and readiness to host and defend peacekeepers. And on the whole, despite Israeli acts of provocation, the new Syrian authorities continue not to demonstrate hostile intent vis-a-vis Israel, and they do not pose any real threats to its national security. We wish to recall that in March, at Russia and the US's initiative, a presidential statement was adopted. Paragraph 4 of this statement calls upon all states clearly to refrain from any action that may further destabilize Syria or interference in its domestic affairs. Furthermore, the permanent representative of Israel to the UN, Danny Danon, on the 9th of December 2024, sent to the Secretary General of the UN and the President of the Security Council a letter describing as temporary, limited, and defensive the nature of the measures undertaken by the Israeli army in the south of Syria, including in the deployment area of UNDAF forces. We call upon the Israeli side to, in practice, reaffirm the commitment set out in the letter to the disengagement agreement and to international law, and to, without any preconditions, immediately revert back to compliance therewith. At the practical level, this includes the withdrawal of Israeli army units and the termination of arbitrary strikes. On the whole, we view as nefarious for the security of the entire Middle East any attempts to destabilize Syria or derail efforts to towards normalization of the situation in the country. Only a strong, united, prosperous, and independent Syria, with respect for the rights of all ethno-religious minorities, will be a home for all Syrians. A Syria that embarks upon the path towards national reconciliation with a unified army and security forces, with, among others, experienced Syrian professionals in their ranks, a Syria that will become a reliable and predictable partner for all states in the region. We strongly condemn any attempts to exploit the period of political transformation and economic uncertainty to impose foreign and alien directives upon the Syrian people. Not only such actions will be detrimental to ordinary civilians, but the Syrian civilians, but they may generate centrifugal processes and spawn prolonged chaos. This must be prevented. Furthermore, reaffirm our unchanging and principled position about the sovereignty of Syria over the Golan Heights. We believe that lasting normalization of the situation in Syria is only possible through inclusive intra-Syrian dialogue, which is geared towards the achievement of national consensus and the advancement of a comprehensive political settlement in accordance with the core principles which are enshrined in Security Council Resolution 2254. We believe that the UN needs to play a key role in accompanying the Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. We extend our support for the efforts of the UN Special Envoy Geir Peterson, and we call upon the Syrian authorities to proactively engage with Mr. Peterson. Mr. President, we wish to separately draw attention to the importance of a transparent and an objective investigation into the recent wave of violence in the coastal regions of Latakia and Tartus, where hundreds, if not thousands, of Alawite, Christian, and other ethnic and religious minority civilians were wounded and killed. We are awaiting the results of the work of the relevant commission which has been put together by the Syrian authorities, the results of which must be promptly brought to the attention of the membership of the Security Council. This demand is also set out in the relevant presidential statement, which inter alia emphasizes the need to expeditiously hold all perpetrators to account. Only on this sound, just, and inclusive foundation is it possible to build a new Syria where the rights of all ethno-religious minorities and all citizens of that country will be upheld. We trust that the Syrian authorities will adopt a constructive approach vis-a-vis implementation of the provisions of the above-mentioned presidential statement. Mr. President, the Russian Federation is a loyal, tried and true friend of the Syrian people. We have been and continue to uphold the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria. We genuinely hope that the Syrians will adopt and implement the right decisions that will guarantee political and social stability in the country, as well as progressive and sustained development for the benefit of all residents of that state, barring none. We stand ready to help to achieve this as a permanent member of the Security Council, as well as bilaterally. Thank you. I thank the permanent representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Greece. Thank you very much.
By thanking our briefers, Assistant Secretary General Chiari and Under Secretary General Lacroix, for the valuable information they have provided. Today, I would like to highlight the following 3 points. First, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria must be respected by all. Syrian sovereignty has been systematically violated. We reiterated our call for the full implementation of the 1974 disengagement agreements and emphasized the responsibility of all parties to uphold international obligations. While we recognize the right of Israel to defend itself and ensure the security of its citizens, we stress the need for this to be done in accordance with international law with the utmost care to avoid civilian casualties. We express our condolences for those deceased and pray for the speedy recovery of those injured. We similarly draw attention to violations of Syrian sovereignty in the north, coupled with ongoing violations and kinetic activities, further exacerbating Syrian stability. We deplore attacks in Syria north and northeast, among others on the Tishrim Dam, which is key for local water security. Greece continues to stand firmly in support of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity, stressing that a united, secure, and peaceful Syria is the best way to ensure the well-being of its people and regional stability for Syria and its neighbors. Second, a truly inclusive political transition combined with transitional justice is the key to viable peace in the country. Following the fall of the previous regime in Syria, Greece remains steadfast in its solidarity with the Syrian people as we work towards the recovery of the country. This recovery can only be achieved through a truly inclusive political transition, one that is guided by the principle of Security Council Resolution 2254, supporting the formation of credible and resilient state institutions which respect international law and the international law of the sea, the protection of the full integration of all Syrian communities, including Christian, Alawites, Druze, and Kurds, is key for rational reconciliation and the long-term prosperity of the country. We are encouraged by the recent engagement between interim President al-Shara and Special Envoy Pedersen on the importance of a transparent election process for an interim People's Assembly. The atrocities committed in the coastal regions, as condemned by this Council's presidential statement of 14th of March, underscore the urgency for full accountability and inclusive justice. This is crucial for the credibility of the interim authorities. In this regard, we eagerly expect the outcome of the independent fact-finding committee set up to identify those responsible for the mass killings and bring them to justice. We also reaffirm our support to an independent, international, impartial, and objective mechanism, the International Impartial Mechanism, and the Commission of Inquiry, all critical UN mechanisms in terms of accountability. On the Constitutional Declaration and Political Transition, we take note of the formation of the transitional government in Damascus, and we consider the inclusion of a representative of ethnic and religious group to be crucial for its success. We likewise note, however, that these developments were not met with universal acceptance of all communities, and there might still be some question marks on how representative the makeup of this transitional government is. We are equally concerned that, among others, the increased influence of the executive power on the formation of the legislative authority may not lead to a truly inclusive and viable political process. Third and last point, we must not lose sight of the humanitarian crisis in Syria. Recognizing the civilian humanitarian crisis in the country, Greece made at the recent recovery conference in Brussels a pledge in support of Syria's recovery, contributing to the EU overall commitment of some 2.5 billion euros, tangibly reflecting a commitment to help rebuild Syria. Within the EU, Greece has supported the easing of sanctions while emphasizing that this should be done in a gradual, conditional, and reversible manner. This approach is taken in solidarity with the Syrian people as a means to ensure that expectations are met in terms of an inclusive transition, accountability, transitional justice, as well as full adherence to international law, including the international law of the sea. Mr. President, in closing, let me stress that the only viable future for Syria is one of peace, justice, and inclusiveness. Greece remains committed to supporting a political transition that respects the rights of all of Syria's diverse community, advances the prosperity and security of the Syrian people, and ensures regional stability. For this purpose, we must continue to uphold Syria's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, free from external influence and interventions. I thank you.
I thank the permanent representative of Greece for his statement. I give the floor to the permanent representative of Denmark.
President, And I thank Assistant Secretary General Khiari and Undersecretary General Lacroix for their briefings and for their continued efforts to support stability in Syria. As we've heard, the situation in Syria remains volatile. This was shockingly clear 1 month ago, when violence and widespread killings of civilians rocked Syria's coastal region. Denmark strongly condemns these acts of violence. We reiterate the need for a thorough investigation and that the perpetrators are held accountable. What is needed now is a safe and stable Syria, one that can heal from the horrific crimes of the past and look to the future. This is true for all Syrians and for the wider region. Mr. President, allow me to make 3 points. First, we reiterate our full support for Syria's territorial integrity, political independence, and sovereignty. While we acknowledge Israel's legitimate security concerns, we remain concerned by the recent Israeli attacks in Syria with reported civilian casualties. Let us be clear, attacks against strategic infrastructure are not going to create a more stable Syria. These developments will only further fuel tensions and insecurity. Instead, the focus should be on our collectively addressing security concerns, including presence of ISIL and other terrorist groups, and the reported remaining chemical weapons in Syria. Second, Mr. President, we reiterate our full support for UNDOF and for the 1974 agreement. We call for the full implementation of the 1974 agreement between Syria and Israel. For decades, UNDOF has worked to address both Israel's and Syria's security concerns. We are deeply concerned by Israeli statements that its presence in the area of separation in the Golan Heights could be for an unlimited period. UNDOF must be allowed to implement its mandate unhindered. Accordingly, Israel must withdraw from the area of separation. Third, Mr. President, let me reaffirm Denmark's steadfast support for a genuine political transition in Syria in line with Resolution 2254. The national dialogue, the constitutional declaration, and the recent announcement of the Syrian transitional government are all steps to this end. We further underline the importance of a truly inclusive transition where Syrian women are fully represented. This is all taking place against the backdrop of a dire economic situation with profound humanitarian consequences for the people of Syria. While the response to immediate needs remains critical, this crisis can only be addressed through sustained support for recovery and reconstruction. The UN, through Special Envoy Peterson, is well placed to assist the transitional Syrian leaderships in charting the complex path forward. Mr. President, in closing, significant strides have been made along Syria's path to a new future. However, challenges remain, both politically and in terms of security. The international community, in particular this Council, has a responsibility to support the people of Syria on this path. Denmark remains committed to this end. I thank you.
Merci, Madame.
I thank the permanent representative of Denmark for her statement. I now give the floor to the permanent representative of the Republic of Korea.
I would also like to thank ASGKRI and the USG Lacroix for their informative briefings. After 4 months, the Syrian people have finally witnessed the launch of a transitional cabinet, a critical first step for a long-awaited inclusive transition. However, Syria once again finds itself caught in a web of escalating geopolitical tensions, hampering its prospects for recovery and reconciliation after decades of unbearable suffering. I would like to make 3 points in this regard. First, all hostilities violating Syria's territorial sovereignty must stop. Since the fall of the Assad regime, Syria has neither attacked neighboring states nor indicated any intention to resort to aggressive action against them. In stark contrast, Israel has persistently conducted over 500 airstrikes since that time and is maintaining a military presence far beyond the Bravo line, a clear violation of the 1974 disengagement agreement. While we acknowledge Israel's security concerns, including risks of terrorism, we emphasize that such concerns cannot serve as justification for the use of force against a neighboring state and its civilians, particularly in the absence of a clear evidence of an imminent threat. The right to self-defense, as enshrined in international law, is temporary and contingent, not open-ended. As such, we express our grave concern over Israel's assertion that it will maintain an indefinite presence on Syrian land. And we urge Israel to live up to its obligations under the UN Charter and the 1974 agreement. This includes returning to its prior commitment of ensuring freedom of movement for UNDOF. We also call upon the UN and those with influence over the parties on the ground to pursue a sustainable resolution that respects the sovereignty of Syria and promotes long-term regional stability. Second, we urge all parties to prioritize the safe and verifiable destruction of Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles. We express deep concern over Israel's airstrike last week, targeting the vicinity of scientific studies and research center in Barzah, a site known to have been involved in developing chemical and missile technologies during the Assad era, and which was inspected by OPCW Secretariat during their visit last month. As the OPCW Director General said last December, such airstrikes not only risk contamination, but lead to the destruction of valuable evidence for investigations related to past chemical weapons use. Moreover, they may impede the growing momentum in cooperation between the OPCW and Syria. We therefore urge all relevant actors to refrain from actions that may undermine the full implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention in Syria. Third, we urge the transitional government to advance a more inclusive political process in line with Resolution 2254. While external threats continue to pose challenges, Syria's internal stability is equally at risk as a result of ongoing sectarian violence and exclusion from the political process, a situation that could be addressed through better planning and improved communication. In this regard, the United Nations stands as a capable and willing partner. With its long-standing experience in facilitating political transitions through both political engagement and technical assistance, the UN is uniquely positioned to provide vital support for narrowing existing capacity gaps and rebuilding trust. We welcome the Secretary General's initiative to conduct an integrated strategic assessment and hope this will spur progress on inclusive governance, security sector reform, and transitional justice. In closing, Mr. President, the track record of the interim authorities over the past 4 months shows that while progress has been limited, meaningful steps forward are possible, provided the international community remains constructively engaged and firmly supportive. We simply cannot afford to lose this historic opportunity to bring Syria back on a path of peace and legitimacy. This process must not be derailed as a result of Syria regressing into a geopolitical battlefield. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank the permanent representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And thank you to Undersecretary General Lacroix and Assistant Secretary General Chiari for your briefing today. I will make 3 points. First, since this council last met, Syria has made further positive progress in its political transition. The UK welcomes the announcement on the formation of the new Syrian government, and we look forward to the protection of human rights, unfettered access to humanitarian aid, the safe destruction of chemical weapons, and the combating of terrorism and extremism. The government's formation marks an important milestone in the transition. We hope this spirit of inclusive representation will be carried forward in state institutions and in any further appointments, including to the Legislative Committee and towards a clear timeline for the next phases of the transition. The UK stands ready to work with the Syrian government to this end and to support an inclusive, stable, and prosperous future for the Syrian people. Second, this opportunity for stability is being threatened by the continued violence. We are concerned by Israeli strikes and incursions into Syria with reports of civilian deaths. These actions risk destabilizing Syria and the wider region, and this is in no one's interest. We recognize Israel's focus on protecting the security of its borders and its people, but the actions it takes must be proportionate and in line with international law. We call on all actors to uphold the 1974 disengagement agreement, respect Syrian territorial integrity, and to prioritize diplomacy over force. Third, it is the Syrian people who will suffer the most from this worrying escalation. After 14 years of tyranny and conflict at the hands of the Assad regime, the Syrian people still face a staggering humanitarian crisis. And that is why the UK has recently pledged up to $207 million in critical humanitarian assistance. Our focus should now be on supporting Syrians to rebuild their country. Therefore, we call on all parties to ensure that humanitarian access remains possible across Syria and that civilian lives are protected. The UK will continue to work with our international partners to support Syrians as they look to build a better future. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of France. I thank USG for peace operations, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, as well as the ASG for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific, Mr. Khaled Khiari, for their briefings, which have underscored the seriousness of the security situation in Syria. Syria is engaged in an historic transitional process since the overthrow of the Bashar al-Assad dictatorship. This opportunity has raised hopes for the Syrian people following decades of violence. The aspirations of the Syrians deserve support, and that is what France intends to do. In this unstable regional environment, political transition must enable Syria to become a center for peace and security. That means the cessation of all hostilities in Syria and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter and the relevant resolutions of the UN Security Council. These are essential elements to guarantee a peaceful political transition and stabilization in the country. Fragmentation of Syria is not in anyone's interest. We reiterate our appeal to Israel to end its military activities on Syrian territory and to withdraw from the area of separation pursuant to the 1974 disengagement agreement with respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. Syria and Israel must take account of each other's security concerns. In this transitional period, we must above all make sure that Syria does not fall prey to fragmentation. With that in mind, our Council has asked that full light be shed on the unacceptable violence which cost the lives of civilians, which took place in the month of March as a result of, on the basis of religion. Those who are responsible must be brought to justice, and we will closely examine the conclusions of the commission established by the caretaker authorities to investigate these crimes and the actions that will be taken. In northeast Syria, the agreement in principle signed between the caretaker authorities and the Syrian Democratic Forces is a positive first step towards a negotiated solution for the unification of Syria and guaranteeing the rights and interests of the Kurds of Syria. The terrorist threat remains high, and it is essential for the Damascus authorities to fight tirelessly against this threat, particularly against Daesh, and to resolve the issue of foreign terrorist fighters. The international community is expecting, particularly from the Syrian authorities, the dismantling of the chemical weapons program in full cooperation with the OPCW. And finally, in order to achieve just and lasting peace in Syria, it is essential to guarantee the inclusivity of the political transition. Initial encouraging results have been achieved with the holding of the first national dialogue session and the announcement of a new government. This government must consolidate commitments of the Syrian caretaker authorities and respond to the expectations and needs of the Syrian people. One of the expectations is the setting up of a transitional government. Those who have been convicted of crimes must not go unpunished. And France supports combating impunity in Syria and cooperation with the Syrian authorities. In tandem, national dialogue must be pursued and must involve all components of Syrian society. France recalls its commitment to an inclusive and representative political transition in the spirit of the principles of Resolution 2254. We support Mr. Geir Pedersen's efforts to support this process, and we trust that cooperation between Syrian authorities and the United Nations will build trust and solidify the support of the international community support for Syria. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for this month, wishing you and your team every success. I also wish to thank your predecessor, the permanent representative of Denmark, and her team for their effective management of the Council's work during the past month. I extend my thanks for your prompt response to the request to convene this emergency session. Gratitude is also due to the distinguished delegations of brotherly Algeria and Somalia and the member states of the Arab Group in New York for their support of the Syrian Arab Republic request to hold this meeting. I also thank Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, and Mr. Khiari, the Assistant Secretary General, for their briefings. I also welcome Ms. Liwa Anita Asma, head of UNDOF, with us in this session today. And I thank her and her team for their efforts to uphold UNDOF's mandate. Mr. President, a majority of UN member states, including within this Council, have emphasized over the past 4 months the need to support Syria and the Syrian people during this sensitive phase of their present and future. We have all witnessed the international consensus on the necessity of uniting efforts to end the suffering of the Syrian people, which is a protracted suffering, and to support Syria's stability, security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, as this would positively reflect on the stability of the region and the security and well-being of its peoples. In parallel with those positive and constructive declarations and initiatives undertaken by member states, international organizations, and political groups to support Syria and its people, as we witnessed during the Arab Summit hosted by Cairo, the meeting of the OIC's foreign ministers in Jeddah, the conferences of Aqaba, Riyadh, Paris, the Brussels Donors Conference, and other international fora held in Davos and Munich. So in parallel with all this, the Israeli occupying authorities have persisted in their aggressive actions, which constitute a challenge to these international efforts and aim at threatening the unity and integrity of the Syrian territory, undermining the efforts of the Syrian government, and imposing a new reality that contradicts the hope and aspirations of the Syrians to live in their homeland in safety and peace. Mr. President, the Israeli occupying authorities have escalated their aggression against the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic, posing a serious threat to international peace and security and a grave violation of international law, of the UN Charter and the relevant resolutions, as well as of the 1974 disengagement agreement. Since last December, the occupation forces have launched hundreds of airstrikes against my country, the latest of which was launched on the 3rd of April at dawn on Thursday, and within 30 minutes, several airstrikes were launched against 5 different areas across the country. These attacks resulted in the near total destruction of the Hama military airport, the injury of dozens of civilians and military personnel, and the destruction and extensive damage to other military and civilian facilities in the governorates of Homs and Damascus. Concurrently with this aggression, Units of the Israeli occupation forces penetrated the Daraa countryside and bombed the Al Jubailiyah dam forest area west of Daraa, killing 9 civilians and wounding others. This aggression was preceded by another attack on the town of Al-Quwaya in the Daraa countryside, which resulted in the death of 7 civilians. The latest report of the Secretary General concerning the UNDOF force highlighted some aspects of the Israeli aggressions against Syria. The report clearly indicated the incursion of the Israeli occupation forces into the buffer zone, the significant alteration of the situation therein, and the impact of the forces' operations since the 8th of December, in violation of the relevant Security Council resolutions. Moreover, the report recorded the complaints of our people in that area due to the Israeli occupation army preventing farmers from accessing their agricultural lands and sources of livelihood and damaging them, arresting Syrian citizens, stealing their livestock, destroying roads, disrupting electricity, water, and internet services, and occupying buildings belonging to the Konatora governorate and damaging them. Israeli practices in the territories it recently infiltrated beyond the buffer zone are not limited to the above. They have also extended to threatening the water security of Syria and neighboring countries by seizing control of water resources in southern Syria, diverting river flows and water springs in Mount Hermon and the southern water resources. This will directly endanger Syria's water and food security. On the other hand, the Israeli occupation entity continues its provocative practices against Syria and its people by establishing military outposts and bases for its forces and promoting tourist tours for settlers in the areas it has invaded. This exposes the falsity of the occupation entity's claims that its incursion is temporary and limited. It clearly reveals its aggressive and expansionist intentions and its contempt for the UN Charter, the foundation of international law, and relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. Mr. President, Syria, while reaffirming the content of its 4 most recent related letters, most recently the complaint submitted to Your Excellency, the President of the Security Council, and His Excellency, the Secretary General, on the 7th of this month, which will be issued as document S/2025/216, renews its strongest condemnation of the blatant Israeli attacks and of the provocative statements by Israeli officials, calling for what they termed the disarmament of the Syrian state in the southern provinces, and for promoting false claims about protecting certain components of the Syrian national society, pretending to protect them. Syria, while expressing its gratitude to the states that have stood by its side and clearly condemned the Israeli attacks and called for their cessation, calls on the Security Council to condemn these aggressions and to take an immediate and decisive action to compel Israel to cease its ongoing aggression against Syrian territory, to withdraw immediately and unconditionally from all Syrian lands, to fully comply with the 1974 disengagement agreement, to respect the mandates of UNDOF and UNSO, and to implement the relevant Security Council resolutions, particularly resolutions 242, 338, and 497, to end the Israeli occupation of the occupied Syrian Golan and the grave threat it poses to Syria's unity, sovereignty, and security. While reaffirming its inalienable right to extend its sovereignty over all its territories, Syria rejects any Israeli attempts to interfere in its internal affairs, destabilize its security and stability, or impose a new occupation reality. Syria affirms its commitment to the UN Charter, the provisions of international law, and international legitimacy resolutions as the basis for achieving stability and peace in the region. I cannot fail to commend the efforts of the peacekeepers among UNSO and UNDOF personnel and their leadership in New York and on the field, and to commend their determination and commitment to demonstrate their willingness to fulfill their mandate despite the significant challenges they face. As a result of the practices of the occupation forces, including restrictions imposed on their freedom of movement. Syria reaffirms its willingness to spread its forces along the separation lines and to commit to the disengagement agreement. In conclusion, Mr. President, with every day that the Security Council delays upholding its responsibilities in maintaining international peace and security and ending the ongoing Israeli aggression against my country, the potential for instability increases, and the threat posed by this aggression to the region and to my country, Syria, and all the peoples of the region grows. Attempts to impose solutions by force and to give precedence to the law of force over the force of law are doomed to failure, not to mention that they do not serve regional stability and they contradict the strenuous efforts being made to consolidate the values and culture of peace in the region and advance it towards prosperity and development. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Syria, and I give the floor to the permanent representative of Libya.
Mr. President, at the outset, allow me to submit this statement on behalf of the Arab Group. I would like to thank you for answering the call of Somalia and Algeria to hold this important meeting called for also by the Arab Group. I'd also like to thank Mr. Khaled Khiari and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix for their briefings. Mr. President, the Arab Group expresses its deep condemnation of the military escalation of the occupying Israeli forces, the repeated aggression against Syria, especially the latest attack that has targeted several areas on the 3rd of April, and we would like to recall that such attacks are a blatant violation of international law and the UN Charter. They are undoubtedly a threat to the peace and security of the entire region. It also adds to the suffering of the Syrian people who are already suffering because of the ongoing crises. The attacks of the occupation forces that targeted 5 different positions, including the destruction of the Hama military airport almost completely and the huge damage to several civilian and military positions in Homs and Damascus, are only part of a series of attacks that aim at undermining the security of Syria. It also is a threat to the safety and security of the Syrian people and hinders the regional and international effort to bring about stability in the region. The Arab Group underlines that such attacks are not only a violation of the peace, security, and territorial integrity of Syria, but also a total and blatant undermining of the security of Syria and the resolutions of this council, including 242, 338, and 497, that calls to end the Israeli occupation of the Syrian Golan. It's also a grave violation of the Disagreement of Forces Agreement. This is a clear violation of the mandate of the UN forces, whether they are the UNDOF or the UNTSO. Mr. President, the Arab Group condemns in the strongest words such attacks and call upon the international community and the Security Council in particular to shoulder their legal and moral responsibility and bring pressure to bear on the Israeli occupation forces to stop their aggression immediately and to adhere to the international law and ensure a full and unconditional withdrawal of their forces from all Syrian territories, including the recent movements that only aim at abusing the current developments in Syria and expand their occupation. Therefore, your council must take immediate and urgent steps to put an end to such provocative actions before things go out of control and threaten international peace and security, whether in the region or beyond. The Arab group also stresses, in a parallel with the development of the transitional stage after the fall of the previous regime and the continued effort to bring about development, to lift economic sanctions against Syria as soon as possible, because they are a hindrance to the revival of the economy of Syria and their development. The Arab group also stresses the need to continue the comprehensive political process with Syria, the Syrian-led, Syrian-owned process that is all-encompassing of all factions in Syria, in line with Security Council Resolution 2254. This will be part of international effort aimed at supporting peace and prosperity in Syria. In this vein and in the same context, the Arab group also condemns the continued occupation of the Israeli forces of 5 areas in southern Lebanon, including new areas that were not occupied before, which is a huge violation of the sovereignty of Lebanon and Resolution 1701 and the agreement between the two countries. We stress that the Security Council must shoulder its responsibility and compel the Israeli occupation forces to fully and immediately withdraw without any conditions from all occupied Lebanese territory. We commend the progress made in deploying the Lebanese forces south of the Litani River, and we support Lebanon, its peace, security, and sovereignty. Mr. President, to conclude, these continued aggression, while most countries of the world are aiming at de-escalating such international tensions and putting an end to crises and wars which have reached their apogee due to the Israeli occupation forces' violation of the ceasefire agreement, also in Gaza, and the continued violations in the West Bank, show clearly that the Israeli forces are trying to destabilize the entire region. They want to continue this series and chains of wars and killing for only one reason. This is a clear and bad intention to turn these crises as a cover-up for their own internal problems and support whoever is in control. Therefore, we stress our full support to Syria and its people. The security of Syria is part and parcel of the Arab security. Therefore, we call for concerted regional and international effort to put an end to such violations and ensure the respect of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria, and put an end to this situation that will only push the region to the abyss. It is high time for Syria to recover from the crises and enjoy peace, security, and prosperity. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent representative of Libya for the statement on behalf of the Arab group, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank our briefers here today. Amid serious and sustained instability, we are witnessing the reemergence of radical Islamic armed groups committed only to destruction, terror, and annihilation of our nation. These groups in southern Syria are working to establish military infrastructure in areas just kilometers from Israeli communities. That infrastructure includes rocket launchers, explosives, and underground facilities, all designed to threaten the lives of innocent civilians. Israel cannot and will not allow this to happen. We have been clear and consistent. This is our policy. We will do whatever is necessary for however long it takes to prevent another October 7th. The images of October 7th are burnt into the minds of our people. We know what happens when a terrorist network is permitted to entrench itself, when warnings are ignored, when red lines are crossed without consequence. We have seen the signs: organized terrorist cells, foreign-built weapon systems, and the consolidation of hostile forces in southern Syria. We have acted, and we will continue to act. Our actions are guided not by ambition of expansion, but purely by necessity, security, and prevention. Colleagues, these clear priorities have defined recent Israeli operations in Syria. One such example is a ground mission recently conducted by IDF special forces in central Syria. There, our forces dismantled an underground missile factory constructed by Iran. This factory of death had already begun producing precision-guided missiles, several of which were subsequently used in attacks on Israeli territory by Hezbollah. That factory is no longer operational. In the weeks that followed, Israeli forces confiscated or destroyed more than 3,300 weapons and military assets which belong to Hezbollah. Among them, long-range rocket components, drones, anti-tank missiles, and tools for cross-border infiltration. These weapons were manufactured for a clear purpose: attacks on Israeli civilians and on regional stability. Let me be clear, Israel does not seek territorial gains in Syria. Our operations are precise and rooted exclusively in threat neutralization. Where a threat exists, we will meet it without hesitation. We must remind this Council that it is not only an Israeli civilians who stand to suffer from the growing entrenchment of jihadist groups. The Druze community of southern Syria, with whom Israel shares historic and familial ties, is increasingly at risk from the spread of jihadist groups in their traditional areas. These extremists threaten the fabric of diverse communities. We are committed to our Druze communities in Israel to do everything to prevent harm to their Druze brothers in Syria, and we will take the steps required to maintain their safety. Mr. President, Israel continues to coordinate with UNDOF under the framework of UN Security Council 350. We respect the mission's mandate and we support its stabilizing role along the disengagement lines. But let us be frank, peacekeeping efforts alone cannot stop the spread of sophisticated weaponry. They cannot intercept Iranian missile parts or dismantle terrorist tunnels. They cannot prevent the creation of launch sites embedded in civilian terrain. We are committed to deconfliction. We are committed to dialogue, but we are also committed to the protection of our people, and that must take precedence when lives are at stake. Council members, the Syrian government is in transition, and its authority throughout much of the country remains fragmented in reality. Control is contested. Security forces are overextended. And in the absence of cohesive governance, it is the most radical and violent actors who are taking advantage of this reality. Among the most troubling developments is the resurgence of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad activity in southern Syria. In recent months, Hamas operatives have re-established command centers and weapon caches in areas such as Beit Jan and the Dara refugee camp, again, using refugee camps near Damascus as a cover for military buildup. These actions directly endanger Israeli citizens and must be addressed with urgency. In addition to Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad continues to operate with Iranian backing, maintaining dozens of command centers in Syria. These groups are not independent actors. They are proxies of Iran, trained, equipped, and funded with clear goals to attack Israel and destabilize the region. The recent movement of hundreds of PIJ terrorists from Lebanon to Syria only underscores this threat. Terrorists thrive in instability. This is not theoretical. It is a pattern, one you have seen and discussed too many times in this chamber before. The Council must acknowledge this reality. Southern Syria is vulnerable to becoming a forward base for extremist groups unless the international community, including this body, treats the situation with the urgency, seriousness, and clarity it demands. Israel's position is principled and consistent. We will act to prevent the consolidation of terrorist groups along our borders. We will maintain a demilitarized buffer zone to keep civilians safe. We will support humanitarian cooperation with threatened communities, especially the Druze. We'll engage constructively with international mechanisms. Above all, we will continue to dismantle, disrupt, and deny the ability of our enemies to prepare for the next war. This is not escalation, it is protection. It is what every responsible nation would do in our position, and what any government here would demand if the same threats were directed at its citizens. We urge this Council to adopt a posture grounded in realism, not political rhetoric. The challenges in Syria are not going away. If left unaddressed, they will grow and they will not remain confined to one border. The international community must understand what is at stake, not just for Israel, but for all those who wish to see this region free from the grip of terror. We should all remember that a selective approach by this Council, scrutinizing Israel while turning a blind eye to state and non-state actors fueling terror and chaos in Syria, will not serve the cause of peace and stability. A genuine commitment to stability in Syria requires acknowledging and addressing the full spectrum of threats facing the region. Israel will continue to defend its people decisively, consistently, and in accordance with international law. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, let me express our appreciation to ASG Chiari as well as USG Lacroix for their comprehensive briefings. Mr. President, we meet today at a critical moment for Syria. The decisions of the international community will influence whether Syria advances towards peace and stability or falls back into conflict and fragmentation. Mr. President, despite immense challenges, the new Syrian administration has made notable progress. The National Dialogue Conference, the Constitutional Declaration, and the formation of a technocratic government reflect a commitment to building inclusive national consensus. These steps signal the administration's will to lead a Syrian-owned, Syrian-led political transition in line with the aspirations of its people. We also note the responsiveness to regional and international concerns. Their engagement with various countries and their constructive dialogue established with UN bodies, particularly the Special Envoy, are commendable. We welcome Syria's proactive approach on the chemical weapons file. Its firm commitment to the complete destruction of remaining stockpiles is commendable. The Syrian authorities granted full access to the relevant sites and extended full cooperation to the OPCW technical team. Taken together, these steps point to a readiness to open a new chapter based on constructive engagement with the international community. The Syrian authorities have also made clear that they harbor no hostile intent towards their neighbors. Mr. President, despite these positive signs, Israel continues its unprovoked aggression against Syria. Repeated airstrikes and land incursions without justification violate Syria's sovereignty and threaten regional stability. We echo, therefore, the condemnation expressed by the Special Envoy. This Council must act urgently to prevent further escalation. Israel's military actions not only undermine Syria's internal security, but also regional stability. They also weaken Syria's capacity to fight Daesh, directly harming our collective counter-terrorism efforts. Strikes on suspected chemical storage sites raise serious risks and hinder accountability. Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity must be fully respected. We call on the international community, especially this Council, to end Israeli aggression and ensure full implementation of the 1974 Separation of Forces Agreement. Mr. President, eliminating terrorist organizations in Syria, including Daesh and PKK, YPG, the so-called SDF, remains essential for lasting peace and unity. We prioritize cooperation with regional countries to address shared security threats. Last month's meeting among Turkey, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria is a strong example of regional ownership and collective resolve. We are closely following the agreement reached between the Syrian administration and the so-called SDF. Terrorist structures must be dismantled. All armed elements must surrender their weapons to the Syrian state. All terrorist entities must be removed from Syrian territory. Security responsibilities of detention centers and camps in the northeast must be swiftly transferred to the Syrian administration. Turkey stands ready to cooperate with Syria on this vital task. Mr. President, failure in Syria is not an option. A successful political transition is imperative, not only for Syria, but also for regional stability. We must support Syrian government to build on recent gains. Yet, humanitarian funding for Syria remains insufficient. We call on all members of the international community to mobilize resources for urgent humanitarian needs and Syria's reconstruction. Barriers to cash flow and investment must be lifted. All sanctions should be removed unconditionally to enable Syria's integration and allow its people to rebuild their lives. The international community bears a collective responsibility to help the Syrian people recover with dignity. It is time to demonstrate genuine solidarity. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Turkey for her statement. There being no further names inscribed on the list of speakers, the meeting stands adjourned.